Welcome to the National Geographic Explorer as we begin our journey down to the Great White Continent. On this expedition, we'll be following in the footsteps of the early explorers like Shackleton. We'll be seeing the grand tabular icebergs, sailing around through ice as our ship punches through. But of course, we'll be doing it in style. We'll travel to the western side of the peninsula that looks like Alaska on steroids. Snow-capped mountains cascading down to the sea, huge glaciers, and all three species of brush-tailed penguins, the Adelie, the chinstrap, and the gentoo. I've been coming to Antarctica for 15 years. I still can't quite put it into words why I fell in love with this great white continent, but it is one of the most amazing places on the planet and really looking forward to sharing it with you.
My name is Karen Kosmowski and I'm a photographer. I've worked for National Geographic for over 25 years. And during the course of that time, I've traveled to every continent on this planet except for Antarctica. So I'm really excited to be here as a representative of the National Geographic. It's amazing. It's just the most spectacular place on this planet. There's a lot of challenges, of course. I mean, it's so big and vast that it's really hard to even focus on what you're going to photograph. But, you know, my key or my tip to people is just focus down, and you'll have a great time here with the pictures because the light is amazing. It's flat, so you can get a really good sense of the details in the icebergs and in the snow and in the animals. So it's really just an amazing place. We're looking forward to having a great time on the White Continent with Lindblad Expeditions and National Geographic.
One of the cool things about the Antarctica trip is that we have to make this crossing of the Drake's Passage. And a lot of people look at it as either downtime or time for seasickness if the weather is rough, whatever. I like it as the photo instructor because it gives me a chance to work with people and their cameras, to get them familiar with their equipment and to kind of get that instruction out of the way so that tomorrow morning when we arrive at our first penguin colony, we're set to go. So we're learning about cameras this morning. We're working on our individual cameras, making sure we know all the controls and things. Later on this afternoon, we're going to head out back and we're going to photograph birds around the boat that are flying around, so we get a chance to use what we're learning this morning as well as just learn about our cameras.
So since Antarctica is isolated from the rest of the world due to the fact that west winds are constantly swirling around the continent in a clockwise direction, that means that there's a great amount of fetch. Fetch is when you have large stretches of open water where the wind can just continually cycle. And that's exactly what's happening around Antarctica. So albatross, other seabirds that we see down here, they're able to take advantage of the high winds that are here. They don't even have to flap their wings because they're acting like gliders. So scientists have actually put pulse oximeters or heart monitors on birds on the nest versus birds that are in flight, and turns out that they have about the same heart rate on the wing as they do on the nest. And that's how efficient these birds are at flying. And so coming down in the Drake Passage, we get a chance to see birds in action like that, just taking advantage of the winds that are constantly circulating around this continent.
After a day of crossing the Drake Passage, we came through the fog and saw the Shetland Islands and saw our first signs of penguins with them porpoising through the water. And then we came here to Half Moon Island, this great volcanic island that has excellent rock formations for the penguins to have their colonies. So then we hiked up through the snow and got to the hill here, and we have these great close-up views of chinstrap penguins.
Well, here we are at Half Moon Island. This is a fantastic colony for the chinstrap penguins, the second largest of the brush-tailed penguins. Chinstrap penguins are perhaps the most feisty of all the penguins in the Antarctic. They breed here from the spring, and now we can see in this colony the first stage of the breeding season. A lot of the penguins that we see behind me are sitting on eggs. They lay 2 eggs, and after 4 to 5 weeks, those eggs will start hatching. Now the parents back then will start doing more shorter trips, bringing a lot of food for those chicks. If the season is a good season in terms of food and good weather, both of those chicks will be reared by the parents. If not, one of the eggs will be chosen and the other one will be abandoned, just to give the one chick all their efforts and all the chances for survival. So in this colony we can see a lot of movement, a lot of action. You can hear the penguins calling. The chinstraps are the most vocal of all the penguins. It starts with a neighbor being too close, someone calling their partner. It doesn't matter what it is. It just starts with one, and then it just becomes a contagious sound that it just transmits throughout the whole colony. When you see a penguin colony, you see all the penguins nesting nearby. It seems like they're all friends with each other, but don't be confused. This is just a safety technique. If you're nesting with your closest neighbors, 20, 30, 50 of them, you have better chances of survival. Why is that? You've got some birds that are scavengers. They want to eat the eggs or the chicks that you have on your nest, and so if a bird approaches you, you've got at least 2 or 3 of your closest neighbors fighting for that bird to get away from the nest. You won't see many other penguin species nesting nearby. The chinstraps like to keep it tight, keep it and within their species as well. It's a great introduction to the wildlife of Antarctica. It's a great introduction to the penguins of the Antarctic. Chinstrap penguins, perhaps my favorite penguins in the Antarctic. They have a great attitude, they look good, and very feisty.
This old, we call a rotten tabular, this old piece here, you can actually see the original snow layers that made up the ice. See those faint parallel lines? Those are the original snow fall that makes up all the ice. And that's how glaciers are formed. All ice on land is formed that way. Snow falls, the next storm dumps some more snow, and then the overlying layers compress the underlying layers and turn them into ice. Just a matter of squeezing out enough air that they turn into ice. And then those pieces, that ice that's formed on the land will slowly make its way down to the ocean. In the case of the tabular bergs, they're coming off the ice sheets. So as they flow out in the ocean, they do it slow enough they don't have crevasses or seracs in them, the big cracks like you see on these smaller glaciers. And so these pieces break, and then they start slowly moving around the continent, and they break down into smaller and smaller pieces. So this tabular piece is probably about 200 meters by 300 meters around, same as yards, 2 by 300 yards. But again, it's just barely hitting the bottom. So the volume of ice you see above the waterline, multiply that by 7, and that gives you how much ice is below the waterline. So that's not everything, that's a huge piece of ice down below. So if we move through this small ice, it's called brash ice. That's an onomatopoeia if you think of the word brash. As I push through it, it makes that sound. Then you've got these smaller pieces that we couldn't pick up. Brash is basically anything you could pick up. But anything less than a meter or 3 feet above the water, these are growlers. Anything that I would bounce the boat off of instead of pushing it out of the way. Bergy bits, anything more than a meter but less than 5 meters, so more than 3 feet but less than 16 feet above the waterline. And then anything larger than that is an iceberg. So we've got lots of icebergs, small, medium, large, lots of bergy bits. We've got the whole range in here.
So earlier today, we were cruising in the Panola Strait, and we came across 2 of the 4 Antarctic seals that we see down here. We saw a leopard seal and a Weddell seal. These are both related seals. They belong to a group of seals called the lobodontine seals. The leopard seal is characterized by having these lobed teeth that allow it to strain krill from the water, but because they also have these big carnivore teeth, they can also eat penguins and fur seals and a lot of different types of prey, whereas Weddell seals don't have the same teeth, but Weddell seals live frequently out on the fast ice, which is unique among the seals that are here in Antarctica. Most of them are on the pack ice and over open water. And as a consequence, they have to maintain breathing holes throughout the winter. And they do that by grinding at the ice with their teeth. And unfortunately, the consequence to grinding ice with your teeth is that your teeth wear down. So unfortunately, the Weddell seals that we saw have a relatively short lifespan because they lose their teeth. This was a wonderful introduction to some of the seals that we have a chance to see living out here on the sea ice in Antarctica.
Yeah, we just came back from the Enterprise Islands. We are in Danko Island. The island was named after the first officer of the Belgique. That was the vessel that Kalash brought to this area. Danko died of a heart attack in this area, and this island was dedicated to him. And here we have gentoo penguins, a very good and healthy population of gentoo penguins compared to Adelis and chinstraps in this area. They are right now incubating. We're going to see the chicks hatching anytime from now on in the next couple of weeks. They lay 2 eggs, and we're going to see the first chick to hatch, and then 5 to 6 days later, the second chick. They are very flexible, the gentoos, as compared to other penguin species like the Adelis and the chinstraps. They're very flexible when it comes to the diet. They're also flexible when it comes to the weather conditions. And it has been a fantastic evening here in Danko Island, and we're enjoying the light, which is superb at this time of the day, which is very late actually.
Well, it's the day before Christmas, and what a day to start celebrating the holiday season. Now, this morning we were awakened at 4 o'clock for sightings of killer whales. We had 2 groups of killer whales just feeding along the Gerlache Strait. It was fantastic to get up for that, and it was definitely the sign for a fantastic day in the Antarctic. Now, on harbour here, it provides a great opportunity for a hike. It's about 800 feet elevation that you gain, and a little bit hard, but well worth it. The views from up here are spectacular. Not only we have the chinstrap penguin colonies that we are enjoying very much so, and wondering how they get all the way up here when it just took us so long to actually match that distance. The weather is just spectacular today, and is allowing us to see so far. In fact, we've got Gerlache Strait just very nice and quiet. We can see the zodiacs having a good time, and we can even see the mountain tops. In fact, Mount Francis, the highest mountain in the peninsula, is visible, which is a very rare sight, but it is all out there for us today.
My name is Valerie Dietrich.
And my name is Tracy Dietrich, and we're from Houston, Texas.
Well, we are in Antarctica. I don't know exactly where we are in Antarctica, but we took a hike up the mountain, which was very sweaty, so now I have no layers on. And then we've seen a colony of chinstrap penguins this morning. And we also saw a skua steal an egg from the penguin.
Well, coming to Antarctica for me and for us is a dream come true. I've wanted to come here for probably over 10 years, and number 7 continent for me, number 6 for my wife. And it's just God's magical beauty. Glaciers and icebergs and mountains, and we get to walk around and see Mother Nature at work with the penguins and them nesting and warming their eggs. And we've seen seals sitting out on the small icebergs. It's been absolutely marvelous.
I think maybe one of the highlights was seeing the killer whales this morning. That was pretty incredible. It's been an amazing trip so far, yeah.
Well, it's Christmas morning, and while our friends and family are back home hoping for a white Christmas, here on Booth Island in Antarctica, we got a great white Christmas and great white icebergs and beautiful penguins. We have all three species of brush-tailed penguins here on Booth Island, and it's a beautiful, beautiful place besides. As a matter of fact, I've mostly been concentrating less on the individual penguins and more photographing the landscape with the penguins. We've been doing a lot of wildlife landscapes with the penguins in the foreground, and then also showing the beautiful, beautiful scenery that's Antarctica, with the mountains, the icebergs, and everything else. When I'm shooting wildlife landscapes, what I like to make sure I have, A, is a lot of depth of field. So we're using the higher number f-stops. The bigger the number, the more depth of field you have. I'm putting it on a tripod, and normally I'd like to get low with wildlife, but in this case, because I want both wildlife and I want to see the entire colony and the background, I'm raising my tripod up just a little bit so I can look down on the penguin colony, but also get a lot of the landscape. And pointing down also allows me to block out some of the white sky, because we do have a cloudy day today. The cloudy day is beautiful because it makes for nice even light, but I don't really want a lot of the clouds in the photo. And it's a great place to really practice a lot of different types of photography. So we're utilizing all of our equipment, all of our lenses, everything, and it's great to be out here in this habitat doing it.
Okay, so I've been diving 2 times, and you must think I'm a little crazy, but as long as you wear the right gear, you can go into this temperature. And I went diving with a very special dive buddy, with Santa Claus. There he is. Very festive dive. He was distracting me a little bit, I must admit. He was the most interesting creature under the water. As we went down, this area, we started out at maybe 40 feet of depth or something like that. And there isn't a huge diversity, but we started out seeing some of these limpets. They're gastropods, and they're mollusks. So they basically feed on the surface of the kelp. Most of the animals that we see on this bottom are mobile. They have to come back after ice scrapes everything on the bottom, and then these animals come back. The algae that you see there, the green algae and kelp, it disappears at some point when the icebergs scour the bottom, which could go all the way down to maybe 15 and even to 30 meters. So what you get there at this depth is mostly kelp, and the surface of the kelp is completely colonized by epiphytes, which are different kinds of algae. So that's at 28 feet. And well, there are some echinoderms there, some sea stars, different species, but not a huge diversity. Remember, this area gets plowed completely. But you would be amazed of the colors that you can find down there. These are predators. So if you find them on the kelp, what did we see before on the kelp? Limpets. So these sea stars are carnivores. They're voracious predators, and they can detect the limpets. They just walk around with their hundreds of tube feet that you can see on this shot that work by hydraulic pressure. They have a pump that pumps seawater into these feet. Now, Santa is not dead. He is shooting something really cool. He found a sea cucumber. And even if sea cucumbers, you may have a different impression of them, when they are feeding, they have their gills extended like that, like you see, And those gills are not only exchanging gases, but they are also trapping small particles in the water. And then each one of those arms gets put into the mouth. And then, like if you dip your finger in peanut butter, you just put it in and then pull it out. Now, this thing is a worm. It was much longer than I am tall. And that's a Nemertean worm. They are predators, and they're kind of funny looking, but they're entirely carnivores. They have a mouth similar to that of a butterfly, like a proboscis, and that's how they hunt their prey. And they're sponges as well. Sponges are the most primitive of multicellular animals. The early naturalists considered them plants, but they're definitely animals. They live in colonies, and they have pores everywhere, therefore the name of the kingdom, the Porifera. Now this one is an isopod. It's a giant isopod related to roly-polies, although a lot more boring. It didn't move around, but it was big. It was probably, I don't think in inches, but 4 inches long or so. And a sun star. This looks almost like an octopus, but it's a star with many arms, and you can see how the center of the star is bulbous. It's digesting something. That's the position that they adopt. There's something underneath. Could be another sea star, or it could be a limpet. And there's my hand just for a point of reference, because it's hard to know how big things are underneath the water. 71 feet of depth, and that was the highlight of my dive other than Santa Claus. This one is called a dragonfish. It's in the icefish family, and it's a very interesting creature. It's actually, the family of this fish is probably one of the most interesting, if not the most interesting, because they do not have hemoglobin. See how pale this fish is? It's not because it's very cold and freezing to death. It's because its blood, it's not red. All vertebrates need hemoglobin to transport oxygen through their systems, and this fish doesn't have any, so its blood is clear. How do they deal with this? Well, cold water, as you may know, can hold a lot more dissolved oxygen, and presumably they can exchange some oxygen through their skin as well. They have other adaptations as well. But Santa Claus was being way too distracting. So Merry Christmas to you all, and thank you, Santa. He's our baker.
So this is really cool. We're sitting here on Nico Harbor watching a gentoo colony that's right behind me here. And these are all males and females mixed, sitting on eggs. There's one penguin tending to 2 eggs. And what happens here is the female will sit on the egg for a little bit, and then the male will go out to sea, catch some krill, come back maybe a week later, and then the male will sit on the egg for a little bit while the female goes off to shore, or out to sea to feed as well. And one of the things you can see happening here when you watch this is you'll see individuals walking around between the nests, sort of nonchalantly, just moving around, and all of a sudden they'll reach over and steal a little rock and run back to their own nest and then drop it off there. And this goes on all day. Penguins sneaking rocks from other penguins and shifting them around. So all you see here are these little piles of rocks forming these nests. Right now it's rather quiet, but if we watch for long enough, we'll surely see that happen.
So here we are in Nico Harbor looking at some penguin colonies, and we've basically been watching the penguins interact with each other. They are nesting, and so it's interesting to watch how the various penguins will go around and steal rocks from other penguins' nests, or walk up and down the penguin highways to and from the ocean where they're feeding. So what I'm going to do as a result of the Grosvenor Teacher Fellowship is take this information back to my students, and I'm going to create basically a virtual field trip for my students where I can bring them to Antarctica via pictures and videos and interviews with naturalists that I'll record. And then I can get them to experience what I've experienced here. It's a great way to bring the world to my students in the hopes that someday they'll be inspired to grow up and go to school and become a world traveler or a scientist and study here.
We have several really amazing tools for exploration on the National Geographic Explorer, and one of them is the ROV, which stands for Remotely Operated Vehicle. This machine helps us to explore the depths much deeper than any diver can go. By sending the ROV to a depth of 80 meters, we could observe that light is no longer present, and that means that photosynthesis is not possible, and plants have been substituted by invertebrates. Many of the creatures that we see down here would seem to be plants, but they're actually invertebrates. They are tunicates. We also get to see sea cucumbers and sea stars, but hardly any plants at all. It's amazing to see this ecosystem where sunshine has been replaced by the organic matter that falls from the surface. There's a disconnect between the sun and the energy that reaches this depth, but it's quite connected because photosynthesis happens at the top and all these nutrients are produced up there, and then they just rain over all these animals, and that's the energy from the sun. It is often said that we know the bottom of the ocean less so than we know the surface of the moon, and with an ROV we can take it to one of the most remote places on Earth, which is Antarctica, and bring all these images to everybody's eyes and try to understand some of this magnificent world that is so unknown for most people.
My name is Liesl Scherntanner, and I'm from Sun Valley, Idaho, which is in the U.S. And I'm here working at Port Lockroy, Antarctica. This is a historic British base. It was operational between 1944 and 1962, and some of the science that they did here during those years was cutting edge at the time. The base was abandoned in 1962 and sort of fell into disrepair. Because of the Antarctic Treaty and the environmental protocol, there was a big push to either clean things up or get rid of them. So Port Lockroy was designated a historic site, and much to our excitement, the UK Antarctic Heritage Trust signed a memorandum of understanding to take care of it, and so we do the conservation on this building and 5 others in Antarctica. The first mission here was Operation Tabarin. It was 1944. It was sort of a secret military mission. It had several different sort of functional modes, but the main thing was to reestablish British territorial claims in Antarctica, and they have had a constant presence here since 1944. Oh, we've got it so easy now compared to the way that the early explorers and the early scientists had. I mean, they would sometimes come and have 33-month contracts here, which would be the winters sort of sandwiched by the summers. So very, very long contact, very limited communications. There would be, the first year there was 9 people, but after that there was usually about 5 people here, or sometimes 6, and they would take turns. They would be the cook for a week. They would do the cleaning for a week. You know, they would sort of take turns in the tasking while doing their active science. I mean, meteorology was huge. They would go out day, night, winter, summer, and check the recording measurements every 3 hours. So very, very dedicated science. They did some surveying work, and then in the mid-50s they started doing atmospheric research, which was largely looking in the ionosphere. And sort of bouncy signals off the ionosphere, and learning really what the best frequency were for radio communications. So big advancements in HF radio communications came from the research that they did. I think coming to the historic sites, and a lot of people when they come to Antarctica, they think of either the heroic age as far as the human history here. But coming a little later in time to these sciences, they really set the foundation for the Antarctic Treaty Protocol. I think we'd have a lot different place if it wasn't for the early science that was done here. And it adds a contrast to the natural environment. I mean, it's a beautiful, beautiful place, but it adds an element where you can sort of think about what might have been like to live here and stay here and work here. And I think it makes you appreciate the place all that much more. I really do. I really take my hat off to the gentleman who did it.
Yes, hi, my name is Michaela Sank-Eustace and I'm from West Hartford, Connecticut. Well, I've had an opportunity to travel before in my life and I've been to many places, but there's absolutely no place that I've ever been that matches Antarctica. The environment, the quality of the environment, it was just spectacular. And I hope everybody has a chance sometime in their life to appreciate it as I did. There were so many highlights from this trip. I'll try to think of a few that come to mind immediately. I would say the penguins, the ice fields were particularly interesting, especially the large tabular icebergs. It's the first time in my life I've seen it. And the kayaking on that beautiful afternoon. It was sunny and there actually was some calving we heard, although we never had an opportunity to see it, but we saw the effects in the water. It's just been a spectacular trip. Well, it's very difficult to describe what you're going to take back home, but in my postcards to my friends and family, I just said I wished that sometime in their life each of them would have an opportunity to experience what I just have experienced here, and that I hope that if and when that time does arise, that each of them will find this environment as beautiful and as pristine as I have in this last 10 days of my life.